They say oxygen is free, but my father once tried to convince me I wasn't worth the air I breathed. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital buzzed overhead like angry wasps, each pulse matching the labored wheeze of my breathing. I could feel the pneumonia sitting in my chest like wet cement, heavy and suffocating. The oxygen mask pressed against my face felt both like salvation and prison bars. At 25, I had survived many things, but this infection threatened to finish what years of emotional starvation had started. I heard them before I saw them. My mother's heels clicked against the linoleum with that particular rhythm I'd learned to dread since childhood. My father's heavy footsteps followed, each one deliberate, measured, like he was calculating the cost of every step. When they entered my room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor didn't look at me. Her eyes swept the room, taking inventory of the medical equipment with the same calculating gaze she used when appraising jewelry. Richard stood by the door, his jaw clenched, arms crossed over his chest. Neither of them asked how I was feeling. Neither of them came close enough to touch me. "Still breathing, I see," Eleanor finally said, her voice dripping with something that wasn't concern. She adjusted her designer purse on her shoulder, the same purse that cost more than my monthly rent. "Do you have any idea how much this is costing?" I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat, tangled with phlegm and exhaustion. Richard moved then, not toward me but toward the oxygen monitor. His fingers found the dial, and he studied it with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Don't waste oxygen on something disposable like you," he muttered. And before I could process what was happening, he turned the dial down. The effect was immediate. My chest tightened, lungs screaming for air that wasn't coming. I tried to reach for the call button, but my arms felt like lead. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. Eleanor laughed, actually laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Look at her," she said to Richard. "Pathetic. Can't even breathe on her own." The door burst open. Maria, my night nurse, took one look at the scene and shoved past Richard with surprising force for someone so small. Her hands flew over the controls, adjusting the oxygen flow while alarms shrieked their warnings. She pressed the emergency button, and within seconds, security was there, pulling my parents from the room. As they were escorted out, Eleanor leaned close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, the same scent that had haunted my nightmares since I was 7. "Just die already, Nadia," she whispered. "The world would be so much lighter without you." Something inside me, something that had been dormant for years, suddenly blazed to life. It wasn't just anger. It was determination, crystallized and sharp as broken glass. I would survive this. I would survive them, and I would make them pay. Recovery came slowly. Each breath was a victory. Each day without a ventilator, a small rebellion against their wishes. Maria stayed with me during her breaks, bringing me tea and stories from her own life. She never asked about my parents directly, but I could see the questions in her eyes. "Some people," she said one evening, adjusting my pillows, "they don't deserve the title of parent." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. She patted my hand gently and left me with my thoughts, which were increasingly occupied with a single question. Why did they want me dead so badly? The answer came 3 days later when I overheard them in the hallway. They thought I was asleep, drugged on pain medication, but I'd been palming the pills, enduring the discomfort for the sake of clarity. Their voices carried through the thin hospital walls. "The life insurance policy matures next month," Richard was saying. "If she dies from complications, it's a natural death. We get the full payout." 500,000, Eleanor added. "More than enough to cover Sophia's semester in Paris and the new boat you wanted." Sophia, my younger sister. The golden child who could do no wrong. Who had been given everything while I was given scraps and told to be grateful. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. They weren't just cruel. They were calculating. They had literally bet on my death. I spent the rest of my hospital stay planning. When the social worker came to discuss discharge planning, I told her I had somewhere safe to go. It was a lie, but a necessary one. I couldn't go back to that house. Not now. Not ever. Maria helped me find a small apartment in Echo Park, a neighborhood where artists and dreamers cobbled together lives from part-time jobs and hope. The building was old, the walls thin, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without asking permission. Finding work with a recent hospitalization on my record wasn't easy, but I eventually landed a position at a small law firm downtown. The pay was minimal, barely covering rent and ramen, but the job gave me something invaluable: access to legal databases and an understanding of how the system worked. I spent my lunch breaks in the law library, teaching myself about insurance fraud, financial crimes, and inheritance law. My evenings were devoted to research of a different kind. I learned how to trace shell companies, how to identify patterns in financial records, how to connect dots that others might miss. The first breakthrough came when I found an old lawsuit filed against my father's company. A former business partner claimed Richard had embezzled funds from their joint venture. The case had been settled out of court, sealed, but the initial filing was public record. The plaintiff's name was Marcus Webb. I found him through LinkedIn, now running a successful consulting firm in Seattle. Our first phone conversation lasted 3 hours. Marcus had kept everything. Every email, every falsified document, every piece of evidence his lawyers had told him wasn't enough. He'd been waiting 15 years for someone to care about the truth. "Your father destroyed my life," he told me. "I lost my house, my marriage, everything. All because I trusted him." "Help me," I said, "and we'll destroy his." That's when I met Frank Miller. Marcus recommended him, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Frank was in his 60s, with tired eyes and a rumpled suit, but his mind was sharp as a prosecutor's. He listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a battered notebook. "You're talking about taking down someone with significant resources," he said when I finished. "This won't be easy or cheap." "I don't have much money," I admitted. He studied me for a long moment. "But you have something else. Motivation. And from what I can see, intelligence. I'll work with you on a contingency basis. When we nail him, and we will, I get 30% of any recovery." We shook hands, and the real work began. Frank taught me how to conduct surveillance without being noticed, how to use public records to build a financial profile, how to identify weak links in an organization. We discovered that Richard's company, Sanchez Enterprises, was hemorrhaging money, propped up by fraudulent loans and creative accounting. The charity fund he managed had been drained, the money funneled through shell companies to pay for his lifestyle. Eleanor, meanwhile, had been filing fraudulent tax returns for years, claiming deductions for donations that never happened, writing off personal expenses as business costs. Their whole life was built on lies and other people's money. The smoking gun came from an unexpected source. I'd been monitoring Sophia's social media, Sex 0.05, watching her document her lavish semester in Paris. In one video, she was laughing with friends at an expensive restaurant, champagne flowing. "Thank God for medical insurance," she giggled, clearly drunk. Who knew Nadia being sick would finally be useful for something? I screen recorded everything. Frank had connections at the IRS and the FBI's white-collar crime division. We spent weeks preparing our package, organizing evidence, creating timelines. Every document was verified, every claim supported by evidence. We were building an airtight case. The invitation to my parents' anniversary party arrived at my Echo Park apartment on expensive stationery, addressed in Eleanor's perfect cursive. 25 years of marriage, it announced. A celebration of love and success. I almost threw it away, but Frank convinced me otherwise. "You need to see this through," he said. "You need to be there when their world collapses." I bought a simple black dress from a thrift store, had my hair professionally styled for the first time in years. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The scared, sick girl was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. Someone who had been forged in fire and emerged harder, sharper. The party was at their estate in Bel Air, a massive Spanish colonial that they'd bought with money stolen from Marcus Webb. Valet parking, champagne fountains, a string quartet. I arrived precisely at 8, walking through the front door like I belonged there. The room went quiet when they saw me. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Champagne flutes frozen midway to lips. I could feel their confusion, their discomfort. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere. Eleanor recovered first, her smile sharp as a blade. "Nadia, how unexpected." Richard's face flushed red. "What are you doing here?" "You invited me," I said simply, holding up the invitation. "I thought it was time to celebrate your achievements." I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, moved through the crowd with deliberate calm. Sophia was holding court by the pool, regaling her audience with stories of Parisian nightclubs. She fell silent when she saw me, her face paling. "Hello, sister," I said. "Paris treating you well?" She mumbled something and excused herself, practically running toward the house. I sipped my champagne and waited. Richard had just begun his anniversary toast when they arrived. FBI agents in dark suits, IRS investigators with briefcases, local police with warrants. They moved through the crowd like sharks through water, purposeful and predatory. "Richard Sanchez," the lead agent announced, his voice cutting through the party chatter. "Eleanor Sanchez. You're under investigation for tax fraud, embezzlement, insurance fraud, and money laundering." The champagne glass slipped from Eleanor's hand, shattering on the marble floor. Richard's face went from red to white so fast I thought he might faint. The room erupted in chaos, guests backing away as if crime was contagious. "This is a mistake," Richard stammered. "I want my lawyer." "You'll have plenty of time to call them," the agent replied, producing handcuffs. "You're both under arrest." As they were being led away, Richard's eyes found mine across the room. The hatred there was pure and poisonous. But underneath it, I saw something else. Fear. For the first time in my life, my father was afraid of me. "You did this," he snarled, trying to lunge toward me despite the restraints. The officers held him back. "You ungrateful bitch!" I set down my champagne glass and walked closer. Close enough that only he could hear me. "I learned from the best," I whispered. "You taught me that family means nothing, that money is everything, that the weak deserve to be crushed. Congratulations, Dad." "Your lessons finally paid off." Eleanor was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "How could you?" she wailed. "We're your parents." "No," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Parents love their children. Parents protect them. Parents don't try to kill them for insurance money. You're just two criminals who happen to have kids." The next months were a blur of legal proceedings. The investigation revealed more than even I had expected. Richard had stolen from dozens of people over the years, small amounts that added up to millions. Eleanor had been selling prescription drugs she obtained through fraudulent prescriptions. Their house of cards didn't just fall, it exploded. They were each sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Their assets were seized, the house sold to pay restitution to their victims. Sophia had to drop out of her expensive college, get a job, learn what it meant to work for a living. She blamed me, of course, but her opinion had long ceased to matter. I received a settlement from the insurance company, the money that should have gone toward my medical care but had instead funded their lifestyle. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to pay off my medical debt. Enough to move to a better apartment. Enough to start over. I used some of the money to start a nonprofit, a resource center for victims of familial financial abuse. It turns out there were many of us, people whose families had seen them as ATMs or insurance policies rather than human beings. We met weekly in a community center in Silver Lake, sharing stories and strategies, building the families we should have had. Maria came to the opening ceremony. She'd been promoted to head nurse and wore her new badge with pride. Frank was there too, grumbling about the coffee but secretly pleased to see what had grown from our work. Even Marcus Webb flew down from Seattle, shaking my hand with tears in his eyes. "You did what I couldn't," he said. "You brought them down." "We brought them down," I corrected. "All of us. Together." The last time I saw my parents was at their sentencing. They looked smaller somehow, diminished in their orange jumpsuits and shackles. Eleanor had aged 10 years and 10 months, her perfect facade cracked beyond repair. Richard just looked tired, defeated. The judge allowed victim impact statements. I had prepared a speech, pages of pain condensed into paragraphs. But when my moment came, I found I had only one thing to say. "I survived," I told the court, looking directly at them. "Despite everything you did, every effort to break me, to erase me, to literally stop me from breathing, I survived. And I'll keep surviving, keep thriving, keep building the life you said I didn't deserve. Your legacy isn't the money you stole or the pain you caused. Your legacy is me, standing here. Proof that cruelty doesn't always win, that Phoenix can rise from ashes." Richard looked away. Eleanor stared at me with hollow eyes. The judge thanked me and called the next victim. I walked out of that courtroom and into the Los Angeles sunshine, breathing deeply of the free air. That was 3 years ago. Now I run the resource center full-time, funded by grants and donations from grateful families we've helped. My apartment in Silver Lake has plants in the windows and art on the walls. Real art that I chose because it made me happy. I have friends who know my story and love me anyway, who celebrate my victories and support me through setbacks. Sometimes I think about forgiveness. Not for them, but for me. To release the last chains of anger that sometimes tighten around my chest like phantom pneumonia. Dr. Kim, my therapist, says forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means choosing to set down the weight of rage so you can use both hands to build something better. I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. Some nights I still wake up gasping, feeling Richard's hand on that oxygen dial. But then I remember that I'm here, in my own bed, in my own home, breathing my own air. I remember that I won, not through cruelty but through truth. Not through violence, but through justice. Last week, a young woman came to the center, 22 years old with bruises she tried to hide with makeup. Her parents had been taking her disability checks, telling her she was too stupid to manage money. She cried through the entire first meeting, apologizing every few minutes for wasting our time. "You're not wasting anything," I told her, remembering Maria's gentle hands adjusting my hospital pillows. "You're surviving, and that's the first step to thriving." She looked at me with eyes that held the same fear I once carried. But underneath it, I saw something else. A spark, small but steady. The beginning of her own phoenix fire. We worked with her for months, helping her establish independent banking, finding her subsidized housing, sex 0.05, connecting her with legal aid. The day she moved into her own apartment, she called me, crying again. But these were different tears. "I can breathe," she said. "For the first time in my life, I can really breathe." I knew exactly what she meant. The center has helped dozens of families now, people caught in cycles of financial and emotional abuse, treated as resources rather than relatives. We teach them about financial literacy, legal rights, and most importantly, self-worth. Every success story adds another feather to my phoenix wings. Frank retired last year, but still consults on cases. He sent me a postcard from Florida, a picture of a sunset over the ocean. On the back, he'd written, "Still breathing free air. Hope you are too." Maria and I have coffee every Sunday at a small cafe near the hospital. She tells me about her difficult patients, and I tell her about our difficult families. We laugh more than we probably should, finding dark humor in situations that would break us if we took them too seriously. "You know what I've learned?" she said last week, stirring sugar into her cortado. "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you can't breathe." She was right, of course. My real family includes Maria, Frank, Marcus, Dr. Kim, and all the survivors who walk through our center's doors. We've built something our biological families never gave us. Unconditional support, genuine care, and the radical belief that everyone deserves to breathe freely. I still live in Los Angeles, but I've moved from Echo Park to a small house in Eagle Rock. It has a garden where I grow tomatoes and basil, a luxury I never could have imagined in those dark hospital days. Sometimes I sit on my porch in the evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold, and I think about how far I've come. The girl who almost died in that hospital bed feels like someone else, a character from a story I once read. But she's still part of me, a reminder of what I survived, and why I fight for others who are still gasping for air in toxic homes. Sophia reached out last year, a tentative email asking if we could talk. She's working as a teacher now, living in a modest apartment in the valley. We met for lunch at a neutral location, a small restaurant in Glendale. She looked different, humbled by reality, in a way that made her seem more human. "I didn't know," she said, pushing salad around her plate, "about the insurance, about what they were planning. I swear I didn't know." I believed her. Sophia had been a weapon in their arsenal, but she hadn't known she was being aimed at my heart. We're not close now, may never be. But we exchange Christmas cards and occasional texts. She's in therapy too, unlearning the lessons our parents taught about worth being measured in dollars. The Sanchez name still carries weight in certain circles, but now it's a cautionary tale. Business schools use the case as an example of corporate fraud. True crime podcasts have covered the story, though they always get details wrong, adding dramatic flourishes to a reality that was dramatic enough. I've been asked to write a book about it all, but I'm not ready yet. Some wounds, even healed ones, shouldn't be probed too often. Maybe someday I'll find the words to capture not just the pain but the profound transformation that followed. For now, I focus on the present, on the center, on the people who need help today. There's a quote I keep on my desk, written on a card Maria gave me during those dark hospital days. "The phoenix must burn to emerge." I didn't understand it then, too focused on the burning to imagine emergence. But now I see the truth in it. Sometimes destruction is necessary for reconstruction. Sometimes you have to let the old self die so the new self can breathe. My parents are eligible for parole next year. Their lawyer has been sending letters, suggesting reconciliation, hinting at apologies they might make if I would support their release. I haven't responded. Forgiveness, Dr. Kim reminds me, doesn't require reconciliation. I can wish them well from a distance, hope they've learned something from their fall, without inviting them back into my life. The truth is, I don't think about them as much anymore. They've become bit players in a story that's no longer about them. My story now is about the center, about the woman who called yesterday terrified to leave her financially abusive husband, about the young man whose parents have been stealing his Social Security benefits since he turned 18, about all the people who are one breath away from freedom if someone just shows them it's possible. This morning, I woke up early to tend my garden before the heat of the day. The tomato plants are heavy with fruit, the basil fragrant and full. A hummingbird visited the feeder I installed last month, its wings a blur of motion, its tiny heart beating impossibly fast. I watched it hover, defying gravity through sheer determination, and thought about how something so small could be so fierce. That's what we are, all of us survivors. We're hummingbirds who refuse to fall, phoenixes who chose to rise, humans who insisted on breathing even when the oxygen was turned off. We're proof that cruelty doesn't get the last word, that those who would bury us should remember we're seeds. I water my plants, make my coffee, check my emails from people seeking help. There's work to do. Always more work. But it's good work. Meaningful work. The kind that turns ashes into gardens. I think about that scared girl in the hospital bed, fighting for each breath. And I wish I could tell her what's coming. Not the pain, she knew about that. But the beauty that follows. The strength that grows from survival. The family you choose, who choose you back. But she'll learn it herself. One breath at a time, meta. Until breathing becomes living, and living becomes thriving. That's the real revenge, the ultimate triumph. Not just surviving those who tried to destroy you, but building something so beautiful from the wreckage that people stop seeing ruins and start seeing architecture. The sun rises fully over Los Angeles, painting everything gold. Somewhere in federal prison, my parents are waking up to another day of consequences. Somewhere in the valley, Sophia is preparing lesson plans for students who need someone to believe in them. Somewhere in Florida, Frank is probably complaining about the humidity while secretly loving retirement. Somewhere in Mercy General, Maria is adjusting someone's oxygen, making sure they can breathe. And here in Eagle Rock, in a small house with a garden, I'm living proof that phoenixes are real. We just look different than the myths suggest. We're not magnificent birds of fire and glory.